let's go ahead and get started. The title of this presentation has morphed a few times, but essentially it's Visual Studio 11, primarily TFS 11, and how you can implement Scrum using that. And I thought what I would do is ride on the coattails of the TFS preview, the hosted TFS model that's up there right now, and do most of the demonstrations on that. Since we all have those invite codes, we can go back and try this out right away. And in doing so, I grabbed the almsummit.tfspreview.com, and I figured someone would have that, and nobody did, so I'll probably get in trouble for that. So welcome. My name's Rich Hundhausen. I work at a company, Exsentient, and we focus on exactly this kind of thing, helping companies understand and adopt Team Foundation Server and improve their process. We are a big fan of Scrum, but we know it's not the solution to all problems, and we know it's hard to bring a team into that adoption. And I've noticed a lot of discussions this week on team dysfunction and how to take small bites, incremental process improvement over the big bang. And we're a big fan of that as well. Email address is up there. My Twitter is up there as well. And I do tend to tweet all things TFS and Scrum and that narrow intersection there. So if this is of interest to you, hang out and let me know what's on your mind. And I got Mike from Exsentient up here also. In case we get asked questions that are over my head, I can redirect to Mike and kind of dual processors, go to Task Manager, and that keeps the CPU down to a nice manageable level.
We'll multi-process.
That's right. Not here to teach you Scrum, not here to teach you TFS, just talk about that narrow intersection between the two. But in doing so, I want to just level set. I am assuming you've heard of Scrum, and the Scrum guide that's currently out there is October 2011. The roles, the events, and the artifacts. Events formerly known as ceremonies, formerly known as time boxes. There is a time box to each of the events, but they're not called time boxes anymore per se. And then I took Microsoft's process diagram here, because essentially we take a large backlog of everything we want the product to do that it doesn't do currently, whether it's a bug to be fixed or a new feature to be implemented or a really big idea like an epic. And that goes into a list that we prioritize business value, ROI, and we order it. The team then forecasts what they can do in the sprint into a smaller backlog called the sprint backlog, and then they build their plan on top of that. And in TFS, the plan is usually task work items. So I'm going to go through that motion for you and show how these new web-based tools really help you. At some point, the team is done creating their increment of business value in the form of working software, hopefully, if they're any good at what they do. And they're able to show that at the sprint review, and there's some tasks and activities around that. Again, I don't really care what you're building, who your stakeholders are, what the ROI is. I'm more interested in how to manage the work using the Scrum template and TFS 11. So that's kind of the goal of this talk again, if you're just walking in. I put up a grid here of kind of what is in the Visual Studio Scrum 2 template, at least what I've seen publicly on the preview. And I made some items in red and some crossed out items in red as to what's different from the V1. So how many of you have looked at or played with or are using Visual Studio Scrum 1.0 template? Okay, about a third of the room.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So obviously we've got some new work item types. You've seen these demoed this week. The code review, request, and response. So you can get that feedback work item in there as well, and all the tooling around that. So there's support for that. What you may not be aware of is the sprint work item type is leaving, because now they've enabled you to put start dates and end dates right on the iteration node itself, which is very, very awesome. So a lot of the burn downs and the built-in reports and the built-in screens just know what day it is and know where that fits into the sequence. What we lost with that, though, is the ability to hang a sprint goal somewhere or be able to hang our sprint retrospective note somewhere. So we're back to a document on SharePoint, T-shirts, banners hanging in the break room, whatever. So I don't know if any of you were using the sprint work item in the 1.0 template to manage your sprint goals and manage your retrospectives, but you'll have to find a different way now. As far as queries, pretty much the same. You still have to kind of fix the current sprint queries, although the web-based tooling in the team tools don't really use that so much. They use their own mechanism to support that. But if you're wanting to run the traditional work item queries, the WIC files, themselves to do queries from Team Explorer or the web tools, not the team-based tools, you'll need to make those edits. And I've got that in my list of activities. And there's also a whole series of kind of this new My Work, so you can see that surfacing in your Team Explorer. What's in my queue? What bugs do I have to fix? And what stories do I have to implement? And then as far as reports go, it's pretty much the same. The backlog overview report is a new one, and there's a few other changes in there. And again, this is all based on the preview that's currently in the sky that came out during build. So I'm not sure exactly what Doug Newman showed or talked about that might be different coming in an updated version, but it might be different than this slide here. So I'm going to break this talk down into some short little days in my sprint that's going to end in about 25, 30 minutes. I want to talk about the activities a Scrum team would do with regards to setting up a new product or team project. I try to use the two terms interchangeably, and I really like to get teams to think product-focused and be product-centric in their thinking. But I still meet a lot of teams that are like, well, what's your product? And they say, well, we've got this solution with these 3 C# library projects, then there's this web project. And I'm like, no. What's the product that rolls up into? What's the cool acronym or the marketing name for it? And oftentimes I find that's a hard question to answer.
What do your users get?
Yeah, what do the users get? What's the thing, the shortcut on their start menu that launches this? And the answer is usually Internet Explorer, and that doesn't go very far. So when you create your team project, we strive to have a discussion first on what that maps to, and hopefully that maps to the product itself. And then, of course, we can break things down by area and break things down by folders in source control, and we can get down to the little piece of the pie that's yours. There's activities also for setting up a sprint. Some of that is just housekeeping, getting your queries updated, setting the dates on the sprint nodes, things like that. The daily activities, really Scrum doesn't say much more than have a 15-minute daily Scrum where you synchronize with the other team members on what you're doing, what you've done, what's in your way. And then 7 hours and 45 minutes of go forth and do the right thing, right? Create an increment of working software and deliver business value at the same time. So as far as daily activities go, I've really, in creating the Professional Scrum Developer course, just kind of thought, well, this is what I've thought, and bounce it off a whole bunch of other smart people that do this as well. And we've come up with kind of a list of things a good Scrum team should be doing using TFS each day. And it's the no-brainer things. Update your work remaining on your task work items. Change the states. Update the sprint backlog by putting in new tasks. I'm out of work. Go to the tasks that are not assigned to anybody and pull in one, not just that you want to do, but one that needs to be done. We talk about this maturity and getting to a high-functioning, high-performance Scrum team. And it's things like that. I'm not just a coder. I'm a team member. If the only thing left are testing tasks, be a professional. Do that. Okay? So some of that comes up. Then when you complete the sprint, so we're talking about the ceremonies, the events around sprint review, sprint retrospective, closing down the PBIs. Hopefully you've completed them according to the product owner's acceptance criteria, your definition of done, you're changing states. But what do you do about work you've not finished or work you've not started, which obviously you've not finished? How do we manage that? And unfortunately, there's no good tooling in there for let me take a PBI, a product backlog item that's 70% done, but the sprint has ended, and help me relocate the work. And I don't know that there needs to be that tooling because let the team decide if that PBI goes back in the backlog, or I should say let the product owner decide if it's going to be brought into the next sprint. You pretty much got to assume, though, as a rule, that if you don't finish a piece of work during the sprint, you may never, A, go back to it again, and B, if you go back to it, the work you've done may be wasted. So that's why you want to be very good about, how much you actually forecast and commit to delivering. Because if you get a piece of unfinished work at the end of the sprint, it's more than likely going to be wasted work. But again, I've got my hat on right now that says Scrum on it and not TFS, and I promise I'll take that off. So some of the high-level activities, and I'll get to the demo here shortly, is create the team project and use the Scrum template. The good news is in the next version, it's going to be in the box. Right? So you'll be able to not have to go and download it from the zone and install it and make it part of each collection. It's just going to be there by default. Set up your security groups. Make sure that your product owner and your Scrum Master and your development team all have access, appropriate levels of access to your project. That story hasn't really changed. Get your documentation, your definition of done, your sprint goal. Good place to put that going forward is SharePoint, since the default is to have one of those per team project. Makes a great place to hang that stuff. Set up your areas and your iterations. You might know the high-level areas of your product. These are things that help answer the question of where does this work go? Where was this bug found? Where does this feature fit? So I've got a Tailspin project up here with a very simple area list just to give you that idea. So the team then, forecasts what they can do. They write up a sprint goal around that piece of work. That sprint goal, loosely encapsulates all of that work into a short goal that then the team can really commit to delivering on that. And then you might have to migrate in work items, to bring in your initial product backlog. We did an exercise in our Monday pre-conference where here's a big list of stuff. Some of it may be bugs. Some of it may not be relevant anymore. Some of it's things like we ought to back up our SQL Server every night. Awesome, I agree, but that doesn't go in the product backlog. That's more of an administration task that people should just know outside of that. And some of the items in there actually describe other items. I've been asked to help people set up initial product backlogs, and I find item 1 looks like an actual feature, a PBI, but 2, 3, and 4 just further describe number 1, so they should become maybe acceptance criteria around that. How many of you have gone through that exercise in life? Putting together a backlog from a bunch of disparate systems and sticky notes and spreadsheets and Bugzilla, and yeah, that's not fun, but you got to do it, and that's kind of that pre-game, set of activities. So what I've got here, let me just bounce over and show you where we're at with this. I'll wake up my machine here. Are we looking at it? Did it go off in hyperspace?
I think oh, there it goes.
There it goes, okay. So again, I used my code that I had in my bag, and I grabbed almsummit.tfspreview.com, and I'm pretty sure someone's going to come tell me I shouldn't have done that. But until then, we got 25 minutes to crack on with this. So we've got a project here, Tailspin project. If I pop over here to administration, I can just show you kind of the areas I've set up with this guy. If the server pipes want to be kind to me.
It's kind of got to wake up to our bandwidth here.
To the cloud.
You got the administration stuff down here. Hmm?
The good news, I've already got it set up, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like. So you click it more times if it's going slow, right? Is that how you do this? Okay, here we go. So as far as the areas, I've set up just a real simple grid of areas. Administration, community, orders, products,
there they are.
Marketing, social marketing underneath there. And it's nothing more than a set of hierarchies, so when I start to put my work in, it makes sense to everybody in the company, not just the developers. Yeah, heavens, if you let the developers set up this list, you'll have ASP.NET and XML and XPath and XQuery, and then someone's logging a bug and they're like, I don't know, XML sounds right. So we've got that set up. We've got a lot of the tasks already set up for creating your project. So I just want to share with you kind of the initial product backlog, allegedly. All right, here we go. So I'm going to go into my team, just as who we have. I'm Richard. I'm the product owner. I'm the only actual person up there. The rest of these motley crew members, they came off of Flickr. So there's Dieter. If you haven't been to any of my talks, Dieter is the curmudgeon, database administrator that says no for a living and blocks all development efforts. And long story there. Jake, Tony, so they're helping out with the development of this Tailspin product. All right, so I think everyone's at lunch checking their mail is what's going on here. Be patient.
We have a backlog.
All right, so here's our backlog we just put together to have kind of a starting discussion. We've got several things in here that are bugs and PBIs. In Scrum, again, the product backlog is a collection of everything that you want the product to do that it currently doesn't do. I call that generic term desirements, not just requirements, not just feature requests, not just bug fixes, but all of those things. They can be something very vague like mobile device friendly. Okay, we don't even know what that means to be able to start to give you an estimate of effort. We don't even know what that means to be able to suggest what a business value might be from that. But somebody with a lot of stars on their shoulder in the company mentioned that in passing, so it goes in the backlog. It's a great phrase you can use. We'll put that in the backlog. Okay, it gives enough respect that I'm listening to you, and we're going to capture that. but you know it's going to settle to that cold, icy depths of the backlog where the priority is at 4 digits or more, approval state is not, things like that. So the nice thing about this tool is you can rapidly put in PBIs and or bugs right here. So we've got this new kind of push to create a Twitter feed on our homepage. So we can just drag that in here and just click add, and it bangs in there and saves it. So that's nice. So as you're having one of these kind of feature frenzy moments at a review, and people are like, that's great, can we have this? That's great, can we have this? You can just quickly capture these guys.
Yeah. Quick little thing here. You noticed that when Rich entered that new product backlog item, the cursor in the product backlog itself was at the top, so the new backlog item went at the top. But any place that I may have things positioned, that's where your insert point is going to be. And of course, if I didn't get it right, I can drag it and drop it in the right slot.
Yeah, that's really nice. So I can put this guy, at the bottom just by dragging and dropping it. And if you double click this, you'll notice that there's not a real visible priority field or a stack rank if you're used to that in the other templates. It's here, but this web-based planning tool kind of obfuscates it. But if you come in here to the history link and scroll down and then go to the the verbose all changes, you can actually then look at some of these settings and you can see what was actually changed, and you'll see that there's a priority in here, backlog priority, that was set. So as you drag these things around, you get these really big kind of weird numbers doing lots of advanced Stephen Hawking math to make sure there's lots of space between the different items in the priority fields. The short answer is you don't have to worry about it. It does it for you. So I want to give a little more information here. One thing is I probably should assign this to myself. I'm the product owner. I'm going to go ahead and approve that. Don't know the effort yet. Very high business value, though, because all our competitors have that Twitter thing going on, so we need that ourselves. I should probably put in some kind of a user story here in the description field, so maybe, as a visitor to the Tailspin Toys website, I want to see recent tweets so that I know the business and its products are in good shape. Nah, not necessarily that. Let's be honest. So that the business is still in business. Right? Websites go stale if you don't constantly feed and care for them. So having a Twitter feed on there at least shows, community activity and some activity around that. And then acceptance criteria over here. This is a rich text field. You can put in whatever you want, but I'm kind of a Scrum minimalist, so I just like to put in some bullets. So let's show the last 10 tweets only. We want to monitor the @Tailspin, Toys company account. We'd like to have it look and feel like the rest of the homepage. And let's throw in a zinger. Filter out all profanity. You got that one, don't you? You can do that one?
Yep.
Can't define it, but what do we have, a white list, black list? How do we do that? Mm-hmm. And then how do you filter out the Portuguese profanity? It's a bigger problem than you think.
It's a bigger problem. We have to internationalize it.
Yeah, so we'll need to maybe give this a really big effort. What do you think? Pull out the poker cards real quick. Looks like 13s. Good job. All right, so it's a 13 effort, but it's still a high business value thing. You know what? The product owner wants it, understands that maybe all your team can do that sprint, really pushes it as being the top ordered item. So going into the sprint planning meeting, back to here. So setting up the new sprint. So we've got our release nodes that exist. We've got the dates already set. I think I've already got a sprint set up for today through next week. We've modified our current sprint queries and looked at our product backlog for accuracy. You should actually be doing that one, that fourth bullet down, regularly. It's called grooming the backlog. So when you go into a sprint planning meeting, there should be no surprises there. It should be, we've already been seeing this and talking about this. We've already got things sized. We know the complexities and the risks here. So really it's just a formality. Sprint planning, we say, we've been meeting Tuesday afternoon in Richard's office. 4 hours is because our sprints are 2 weeks in length, and that's 10% of the time per the Scrum guide. So we know what we're going to do next. So the sprint planning meeting becomes a bit of a, check, check, check. Let's go on to the how. We know what the what is. Let's move right to the how. So then let's go back to here and make sure we've got our sprint set up right. I've got my team set up that I've got just a single team monitoring this whole product backlog. So those 4 characters you saw a minute ago, they're handling all areas and all sprints.
Yeah, we have a question out here, Rich.
Should the backlog priority be dependent on the ratio of business value and effort? And somehow set, rearranged or...
Ultimately,
Try to repeat that.
So the question is, should the product backlog be based on some kind of a formula of business value and priority?
No effort.
And effort? Absolutely. Yeah, but it's ultimately the product owner's decision. I mean, obviously, if it's a high business value, low effort thing, that makes sense to do that first. That's the low-hanging fruit. But it could be a mature Scrum team, including the product owner, says, this item 7 down has very little business value, but my team's been harping on me to learn Silverlight, and this is a chance to do a spike on that, but still have some business value. So as much as it grates against me, I'm going to put that up a bit so we can do that next. So yeah, it's a collaboration that a good mature development team can push for learning value and technical value along with the business pushing for business value, and then the product owner takes all this into account and is in charge of the order.
Yeah, the product owner has to have a good sense of the total return on investment that you're getting, not just for this sprint, but looking at the whole picture as well.
So what I can do here is I can just drag this guy over to sprint 1, and that'll update the iteration path here to sprint 1. I can pop into sprint 1, and I can see here the items that we pulled in. So that's basically the sprint planning meeting. The first part is forecasting what work we can do. And this is a fairly large piece of work. Our team is fairly new. The velocity is not really there yet. So we're just going to really forecast that we can do this one PBI for this week-long sprint. Now in here, you can use some of the other tools, and you can do capacity planning by person, capacity planning by activity. You can put in here people are going to the ALM Summit, so our whole team's offline for 3 or 4 days. So you can really start to have some tools help you with how much work can we forecast we can actually do in the next sprint. Teams may need that. Mature teams may not need that level of planning. But at some point, you're going to say, okay, we know what we're doing. Here it is in the sprint 1 backlog. And if we're talking about Scrum per the guide, what we're looking at here is the sprint backlog. Okay, it's the PBI or PBIs that we've pulled into the sprint 1 in this case. So this is actually the sprint backlog minus the plan. And the plan then is just us creating tasks that go along with this. So we can pull this up and pull that little down and say we want to link to a new work item and create a task that way. But it's a bit easier just to go to the board. And the board will be for sprint 1. And then there's this nice plus sign here to just quickly add tasks. Now, it's not as quick as adding the PBIs and the bugs on the last screen, but we're harping on Microsoft to make it as fast as writing sticky notes and putting them on a wall during sprint planning. Question in the back. Yes, you. So the question is the capacity planning tools there. What's the scope of those tools? And it's for the team members. You actually set up the capacity of the team members. We may only have the database person for 2 hours a day, and we know that Thursday and Friday of this particular sprint, he's gone. So you can get all those down to a number of hours for database activities available. It's for the sprint, yeah. It's for the scope of that screen right there. Mm-hmm. Good. We've got a few more minutes here. I want to show you a few more things. So we would create our task, and a mature team may not even need to create tasks. They can just look at this, swarm on it, know what has to be done. But TFS really wants you to create tasks and associate hours so you can watch those burn down. So someone might need to create the Twitter account, and the iterations pulled in. Assign to, you can leave it blank. A mature Scrum team won't know who's going to do all the pieces of work. You're not going to assign them to each other. There's going to leave a pool out there of work to be done, and through the sprint, pull those in and take those on. But the team came to kind of a consensus that sounds like maybe about 2 hours of work, because you've got to run it by legal, and you've got to do this and that and the other. So that's good. We'll just save that. Get something up there. Let me just bang out 2 more quick ones. So someone needs to actually build the create the Twitter control. And you can have a discussion now during sprint planning. Do we buy that or do we build it? Because there's a lot of Twitter controls out there in open source land or tool vendors rather than build it yourself. So, maybe we make the decision we're actually going to create one, and that's, 8 hours of work. Good enough. And then, Mike, I'm going to put you down for the profanity. Build the profanity, filter engine.
There we go.
And how much time for that one, you think?
That's going to be probably about 2 days.
Okay, so we'll call that 4 days.
We've got an engine, a commercial engine that we can leverage with that, but we've got to get it wired in.
But I know you, and you tend to over-engineer things, so I'm going to double that. If you do know the people and who's going to take on this piece of work, I can say, well, that goes to Jake, and maybe this piece of work here, Dieter's going to help us with that one. You can start to see how these swim lanes go. Here's PBI on the left, and then across the top there, who's working on it by state. But you can also pivot this view to see unassigned work, Dieter and Jake, and you can even have it light up like the unassigned. So if you want to come here and say, I've got some free time, I want to do some more work, what's needing to be done, regardless of my activity. My business card says tester. I don't want to do coding tasks. Probably shouldn't be doing coding tasks, but
No. We can get testers started to do code. They just learn how to kind of build a little more sophisticated testing in the process.
That's it.
Does the team draft that work typically?
So you obviously need certain permissions to change the state of a work item, but in my view, the whole Scrum team should have at least contributor permissions, so that they're not blocked by the tool to move work around. So if your question is, can you move my work item to my state? The answer is yes. Just make sure that we're doing that for good reasons. So last couple things here. Daily, update the work items as you need to. You're not going to know everything during sprint planning that you've got to do to deliver that increment. Stuff will emerge. You might get better at that and build more, larger tasks at first that you break down later. So your initial kind of hours estimates, don't make the burn down look like it's doing the funky chicken. You'll get better at that, and you'll be able to use that as more of a predictive tool. You take on tasks, you don't assign work, that kind of a thing. Check in your code, associate with tasks, build a nice increment according to your definition of done. And Scrum Master or whoever's doing the Scrum Master role is recording impediments and hopefully removing them as well. Impediments, just like bugs, should be dealt with, not managed. So fix your bugs, don't manage them. Fix your impediments, don't manage them. That said, you can't fix them all at once. You need to track a few of those. And then as you're completing your sprint, up to the sprint review, you're labeling your code, you're branching as you need to down the road for hot fixing if you do release it. You're inviting people to the review. You're capturing PBIs. That stuff can come at you fast and furious, so captured on sticky notes is fine. And then scribe them into TFS later so you capture that in real time. I'm not a big fan of having TFS up and running during sprint planning, during the daily Scrum, during the sprint review, because I don't like the tool and connectivity issues and that getting in the way of a good conversation. But it doesn't mean that if your TFS is local and rock solid, you can't do that. But I love sticky notes, boom, daily Scrum, sticky notes.
Make a sticky note and then go ahead and put it in, but
put it in.
it's all about transparency and visibility of everything, too.
Exactly. Last few things here, be professional, right? Even though you're the coder and that's what your business card says, if there's testing tasks to be done to deliver that increment, do them. Sit down with somebody and learn. Don't be the specialist that doesn't share your skills. Do what it takes to get that increment built. Deliver on your forecast, deliver on your commitment as a team. And that's part of the message we're saying with Scrum.org is let's be a professional. And to that, quick note, professional Scrum developer, whole program, training, assessment, learn more about it, talk to me, visit the webpage, or follow us on Twitter. And thanks very much.
Thank you.